I grew up in a nice little suburban area. I actually lived at the very end of a large cul-de-sac. My mom worked a 9 to 5, so she was always home shortly after I got home from school. My dad was medically retired from the military, but he still liked to work. He would do random small general contractor jobs, so his work schedule was always random. Anyway, he was working on a house in a neighborhood close to ours. My bus route wouldn't take me directly to my house, so I would have to walk a bit. Sometimes, I don't know when, but I'm guessing this guy saw me walking home. On a Tuesday, I saw a red SUV parked on the side of the road about 4 houses down from mine. I never thought anything about it. Looking back, I remember seeing it several times parked in that general area after that Tuesday. Anyhow, one day, walking home, the SUV was there. Didn't think anything of it per usual. Got home and went through our side door, dropped my backpack, and went to the kitchen to grab snacks. My dad called the house phone asking if I was home, and I obviously was. He had forgot his notebook and wanted me to grab it for him. So I hung up and ran up the stairs to get it for him. He was going to meet me in the driveway. I heard the door from the garage open up. Thinking it was my dad, I yelled that I was getting it. I heard the footsteps, and I could tell it wasn't him. So I sprinted downstairs and opened the front door, running outside. Luckily, I saw my dad's truck, and he could tell something was wrong. I told him someone was in the house. He stopped the truck and gave me his cell phone to call 911. He went inside. I'm guessing I scared the guy when I ran, because he ran too. My dad ended up seeing him run and saw his face. He couldn't catch him due to his injuries. The cops came and we gave our statements and etc. Anyhow, to make a long story shorter, they ended up catching him 20 or 30 minutes later. My dad gave a positive ID. They took him and ended up towing the SUV. In his bag that he was carrying, he had a gun and zip ties. He had a bunch of other stuff in his SUV, and we were pretty sure he was there to take me. I don't know what would have happened if my dad hadn't forgot his notebook. When I was growing up, there was a guy in my neighborhood that had brain damage. I don't know any details as he was many years older than me. How he got brain damage was just rumors kids told each other. He was basically mentally retarded. He was able to work at an ice cream shop and ride the bus to work. He was not completely dependent, but he did live with his elderly parents. I won't include his name in case someone reading is from my neighborhood. He was pretty harmless, except for one, habit. He liked to feel the kids' muscles. He was a big, strong guy, and I was just a very little kid. If you ran into him in a group of kids, things were cool. He would talk, but if you ran into him alone, he would ask to feel your muscles. Now, as a little kid, we had no muscles. I was in early grade school, but he would demand you hold out your arms so he could feel your biceps. Then, he would tell you to pull up your shirt so he could feel your ab muscles. Again, I was a little kid, so no muscles at all. I dreaded running into him alone, and he didn't care if you were walking down a busy street. He would still insist on feeling you up. If you saw him walking your way, you would just run and hide in a backyard so that he wouldn't see you. We had a call that we would yell if we saw him coming down the street at a distance. You yelled out so all the boys in the area could hide, and he was everywhere. He would show up at the little league games and hang out with us kids. There was a giant park near my house. It was all wooded. and we had to cut through it to get to the local grade school where we played baseball and many more. If you saw him coming down the path, your heart would race and you hoped that he didn't see you as you sprinted off the path to hide in the trees. I still get a sick feeling when I think of him and his "Can I touch your muscles?" Thing is, we all took pity on him because he was clearly mentally challenged. Oddly, when us adults get together and someone brings his name up, we sit around joking about it. We remember how we would hide from him and laugh about it. We don't actually talk about the touching. That is never discussed. None of us ever told our parents, at least that I know. My brothers and I certainly never said anything. I'm not sure why. Maybe it was just too embarrassing or humiliating? But knowing that all the boys were targets, I guess, gave us some sort of comfort. We laugh about it now, but it still makes me cringe. My entire body is cringing as I write this post, and I have to admit that at this point, I'm choking back some tears, though I'm not sure why the tears. Perhaps posting this will be therapeutic. Can I feel your muscles? Hi, I joined Reddit specifically to get this off my chest. It happened this time last year, and to this day, every time I think about it, it gives me chills. So I want to start off by saying that I still work for this company, and I still have anxiety every time that I go into work. The company is huge, one of the biggest names in the world, but for privacy purposes, I'm going to call it the Big Cheese, or Big C. I also want to mention that I have crippling social anxiety, and I credit this to being homeschooled most of my life. This will make more sense later. Well, September of last year, I was fresh out of high school and looking for work. I needed this job immediately because I was living with my significant other, and we were barely getting by. My father, my grandfather, they both either work or worked for this company for a long period of time, and it's something that garnered a lot of respect in my family. So of course I was thrilled when I got my first interview. It went great, and I was all set to start training, which involved a few classes and on-the-job training. The classes were awkward to say the least, but nonetheless informative. Well, after the classes, we had our first task: join a group of fellow trainees and tour the work environment. This is when I first met creepy coworker. He was in the very back of my group, seemed a little shy, and didn't really talk to the rest of the group unless he was trying to make an awkward joke to join in. At first, I kind of felt bad for him. He seemed really harmless, but definitely awkward and out of the loop. Knowing as much as I did going into the company, I made the effort to inform him and keep him updated with what the trainers were asking of us. He just seemed so lost and confused, and I thought I was doing a good thing by helping him out. Even my significant other thought so at that time. The training went by without any hiccups, and soon we were given the location of where we'd start out. Ironically enough, the only person that I had gotten to know, a creepy coworker, had the same area I did. Realizing that we'd start out together and both didn't know anyone, we decided to exchange phone numbers. This was so that we could both meet up the next week, the starting day, and so we wouldn't get lost. I thought nothing of this when he asked for my number, and I just assumed it was more because he was nervous and didn't know anyone besides me. Boy, did I live to regret that. The first day of training, we met up at basically a flagpole so that we could wait for our on-the-job trainer, Christy. When she got off the employee shuttle, he started texting me asking where I was. I was in the smoking section, a little ways away, killing my fears with a cigarette. I texted back telling him where I was, and he asked if he could join. I didn't like how nervous I felt, so I wasn't very comfortable with anyone joining me during this time of reprieve. But I saw him coming over anyways. So I scooted over to make room on the bench. This didn't matter because apparently he was going to sit as close as possible to me anyways. I hate touch or people being in my personal bubble, being a victim of other trauma. Touch was something only people very close to me have permission to do. Creepy coworker then proceeded to ask me if he could bum a cigarette. I'm not good at saying no, so I gave him one. After he lit up, he handed me my lighter, which I didn't even notice that he took from the top of my bag. Again, I kind of just ignored the unwarranted invasion of my space. We talked since we had about 30 minutes to kill. We talked about normal stuff like how do you feel about the company, where do you want to end up in it, and many more. I noticed he was wearing tattoo covering sleeves, and so I asked him about his tattoos. He pulled down the sleeves and started going over almost each and every one, all something to do with either a love interest or something geeky. And I listened out of mild curiosity, but quickly got uncomfortable when he started pulling out his phone to show me pictures of ones that he drew. I was uncomfortable because he kept showing me pictures of himself as well, mostly photos of him shirtless, and I didn't really find that appropriate. He mentioned that he was a Marine and that he had gained too much weight after his last tour. I apologized out of sympathy, but suggested that it was nothing to be ashamed of. Unfortunately, after that, he kept smiling at me in a way that I deemed to be admiration. I had seen this look from my fiancé, so I knew somewhere I had effed up. I quickly turned the conversation to more appropriate stuff like music taste. He seemed interested in what music I liked a little too much and decided he should make me a playlist. I said it really wasn't necessary, but he insisted. Later into that very day during the training, he kept purposely doing kind things, like taking heavy boxes from my hands or taking the odd jobs that he deemed too grueling for a lady. I was a little annoyed, but mostly just glad, because most of the jobs meant that he'd have to go to a different area and give me some space. He'd always find a way back to appear beside me and scare me, and I hate being scared, and he laughed it off every time. I was more than uncomfortable at this point, and a nervousness had settled in the pit of my stomach. At the end of the night, after we'd been sent to go home and come back the next day, he decided to walk me out. We'd walk back through the maze my workplace actually is, all the way to the employee costume center or lockers. It was there we had gotten our work costumes and stored our regular clothes in lockers. Well, I was having trouble remembering the combination, and I couldn't find the little slip of paper that told me it. Creepy coworker came up and smirked at me, seemingly waiting for me to finish up. I thought he had left by this point, so I wasn't expecting him to show up. After a few tries, he reached over and out the combination of my lock-in for me. This was a serious red flag for me. He had already memorized my combination, and now I felt as though my privacy was completely gone. Again, I'm awkward and unsure of what to do in any situation like this. So I thanked him, but suggested that he let me figure it out next time. I was hoping he would, so that he would forget my combination. By the way, remember this for later. After changing back into my regular clothes in the girls' locker room, I came out, and he was still waiting for me. I asked him why he had waited when he could have just gotten home sooner, to which he replied, "Because I'm a gentleman, and a lady should be walked to her car so she can be kept safe." I told him that my significant other was waiting to pick me up. He asked where, and I told him down the street like an idiot. I still don't know why I complied with this creep as much as I did, but I had never been in a situation like this one. He told me that was too far for me to walk and that it wasn't safe, so he offered to drive me over to my significant other's car. Due to how tired I was and how much I ached from the day, I just didn't have the strength to argue. I mean, he was creepy, but nice, and I chalked up the creepiness to him just being awkward. So, without anything else weird happening, he took me to my significant other, whom I had been texting the entire time, just to let him know where I was and what was going on. I had a deep gut feeling that I should text him everything I knew about this guy, and so I did. When we pulled up, I immediately got out of my car, and my boyfriend sat there leaning against the car with his arms crossed. He wasn't very happy about him giving me a ride, but nonetheless thanked the creepy worker for getting me over to him safely. The co-worker nodded, seeming to smirk at my boyfriend the whole time. This was when my boyfriend first got a bad feeling about the guy. So we got home, and my boyfriend warned me about the guy, telling me he wasn't getting a good vibe from the creepy coworker. It was not even 3 minutes after that I got a text from him. He started sending me songs and memes and telling me things like, "I really feel like you get me." Now, I was deeply concerned. What the hell did I get myself into? Why did I have to be so goddamn nice to people? The following day at work, I was on the last day of training, and I had a massive pain attack. I have a chronic illness, and the situation ended with none of my managers listening to me when I told them that the pain doesn't last and it comes and goes. They proceeded to rush me to the emergency room. A stretcher carried me through work while I was crying and trying to hide my face. The costumers were quick to take out their phones and film the whole thing. It was one of the worst experiences of my life. But what happens next is worse. I received about 20 text messages from creepy coworker asking me how I was. At this point, I was done. I just didn't respond. After a few random memes, he started texting me that he was drunk and thinking about not going home to his wife. This was the first time he'd ever mentioned to me that he had a wife. I was dumbfounded. Why was he so concerned about me when he had someone he obviously loved enough to marry? I didn't respond. I went to bed. In the morning, I woke up to my boyfriend looking at my phone in anger. My heart sank, and I could only imagine what creepy coworker had sent now. My boyfriend showed me the only text I had gotten since that night before. It was from his wife texting me from his phone. She wrote me a message explaining that creepy coworker had a problem getting attached to women. She warned me that I should stay away from him, and then told me her name. My name. It was after that she had explained my name was a thing for him, and all of his exes had the same name. Now at this point, my boyfriend was telling me not to go back to this job, that it wasn't worth it. But that's not to me. I wasn't going to let one creep ruin this opportunity for me. This job meant the world to me, and I never wanted to let it go. So I told him if this continues, that I'd go to HR, But in all honesty, I didn't really want to go to HR. I was the new girl, and I didn't want the first month on the job to be me fighting a harassment case. Biting my nails the whole way, I went to work. Suddenly, creepy coworker wasn't hovering anymore. I thought this might have been him being embarrassed. I was pretty convinced that I wasn't going to have a problem after that. Big mistake. On my lunch break, he made sure to go on his lunch early and come find me. His normally enthusiastic attitude was gone, replaced by what felt like anger. I was scared. He came up to me and let me know that his wife was full of shit and just angry because he was divorcing her. At this point, I didn't want anything to do with him, so I kept quiet, hoping that he'd take the hint. Nope. He told me he had a gift for me and that he'd give it to me after his shift, quickly walking away before I could respond. After my shift, I go outside my work area to the lockers. I had waited an extra hour and a half, even taking a closing position from a coworker just so he'd go home before me. Well, my lock wasn't locked all the way, and I was now freaked out. I opened the locker to grab my bag and go, but noticed it. A rolled up piece of drawing. I know what kind it was because I myself am an artist. Unrolling it, it was a naked girl. A naked girl that resembled my video game character on World of Warcraft. I had briefly mentioned my World of Warcraft addiction to my group on the first day of training, and I didn't even realize he had heard any of that, much less memorize the information. Suddenly, he walks up even though he should be long gone by then and confronts me. He asked me if I liked it, and because he seemed angry, I said yes. I suggested he didn't do it anymore, as my boyfriend wouldn't like this kind of gift at all. He rolled his eyes and playfully giggled at me like I was joking with him. I wasn't. Not only did he follow me the whole way out of the work grounds, he got on the employee shuttle that I got on to have witnesses. He sat right next to me, leaning on me. I felt like a deer in headlights, mentally begging someone to suggest that he shouldn't be that close to me. But no one paid any attention. Instead, I spent the whole drive trying to get this man to pull his arm off my shoulders. I felt nauseated and my head was spinning. After we got off, I practically dashed off the bus and ran to my boyfriend, who parked the car at the entrance to the employee parking zone. I got in the car and told him to go. He took off and I started crying. I told my boyfriend and he was pissed. He wanted to turn around and punch creepy coworker, but I talked him out of it through tears. I promised that I'd talk to my managers after that. Well, I kept looking for the right time to pull a manager aside, but never got a chance the next night I went in. Now, creepy coworker's attitude did another 180, and he was being extremely, weirdly playful. Then he crossed the final line. He grabbed my butt where customers could easily see him. My coworkers kind of laughed and thought it was a game, but because this time I was pissed and pushed to my limit, I went after him and I legitimately punched him in the ass and shouted in his face, "How'd you like that, huh?" Seething, he seemed unfazed by my anger. Instead, he laughed it off and winked at me. I went down into the basement for the employee bathroom and quickly threw up the contents of my stomach. I cried in the stall, praying to God that this would stop. I quickly made an excuse, used my chronic illness, and went home. So fast forward a few weeks, he had completely swapped out his shifts so he wouldn't work with me, and I felt like I had won the battle. I sent a message, and he realized that he'd crossed boundaries. until the night before Christmas Eve. I had a terrible feeling as my boyfriend was driving me to work that night. I felt gross. I go to work and he was there, flirting with other girls, suddenly having this big ego I had never seen him display before. Like I said, when I met him, he was shy and awkward. It was like his personality flipped every time I had to see him. I never knew which side of creepy coworker I was gonna get. That night, he actually stomped off as all the other coworkers, including myself, closed the joint. He was scrubbing like normal and he didn't seem all together. So he clocked out early and I relaxed. I figured he had gotten in trouble since one of our 4 managers seemed to be upset that he'd clocked out without permission. I was the extra late. The evening festivities were done for the night and my zone was pretty much closed off from customers. So I walked through the massive property to get to the street. I had started taking new ways to meet my boyfriend who picked me up, just so I couldn't be followed. This time, I was going to walk straight out of the grounds and onto the street where the bus stops, where my boyfriend would be waiting at the curb. I was about halfway through my approximately 12-minute walk and I was in a dark area. Out of nowhere, as I'm sure you've already guessed, creepy coworker shows up. He starts yelling my name and following me from behind. I pretend not to notice and walk faster. He yells my name again and again and seems angrier. So I sprint for it. I sprint all the way to cross the shuttle zone and end up crashing into someone's chest. Thank God, it was actually my boyfriend who had a really bad feeling and wanted to be as close to my work exit as possible. I looked back and creepy coworker got on a shuttle, but he was staring from the window, smiling like a Cheshire cat the whole time. Never in my life had I been so terrified. After that night, next night was Christmas Eve, and I was supposed to work, but I just knew that if I went in, something bad was going to happen to me. So, crying the whole time, because I knew I had earned a bunch of points for calling out to avoid him. I cried asking the lady on the phone if I was gonna get fired, and she said she honestly couldn't say. I respected that, but knew I wasn't done. I wasn't going to let this fucking creep make me lose the job that I'd worked so hard to get, even changing my appearance to fit their strict standards. No, so I wrote to the only person I could think of, my trainer, Christy. She was a lead, and she's the kindest girl you would ever meet, a heart of gold. You just knew that being her friend meant that you had a trusted confidant for life. I told her everything. I sent her the screenshots of the text he sent me. I finally told someone with an ounce of leadership that I was scared to go to work. Immediately, she responded and asked if she could tell the managers, and even though I was incredibly nervous, I told her yes. The next day, I was pulled in, and God bless my ex-manager Christopher, because he was shocked at everything that had happened to me and quickly helped me write a report for HR. He led me through the steps and even changed the schedule so I wouldn't work with creepy coworker unless he specifically traded shifts. 2 months go by, and I'm well acquainted with the responsibilities for my work, and at this point, I'm comfortable. But of course, there's no stopping a stalker. He traded a shift and was working the night shift with me. He was angry every time he looked at me, and I avoided him at all cost. Then, around halfway through my shift, I'm down in the basement coming back from the restroom. I'm walking up the steps that led back to my work area, and then I feel someone behind me. Before I could think a clear thought, I was pushed against the wall, hand beside my head. He leans in and says, "You should smile more." Then the bastard chuckles and walks away. I felt pretty hysterical at this point and run to the closest lead, crying and trying to explain what happened. It was at this point that my manager Christopher, pissed off the HR was taking so long to investigate my case, went to them to sped it up. Well, after 4 months of an interview process with HR, finally the case was resolved, and not only he was let go, but I was doing really well in my job finally. Nothing to worry me into not paying attention to my duties. Creepy coworker has left me alone ever since, but sometimes I get random friend requests from guys with no pictures and always similar names, always close to his name. Creepy coworker, leave me alone or you won't like the results. I won't be intimidated ever again, and I will win every battle you throw at me. So let's not meet ever again. Hi, thanks for watching the video. I really appreciate it. If you want to send me a story to read, feel free to do so. My email is in the description of the video. And if you want to follow me on my social media, just to get updates or maybe to talk, the links and info for my Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram accounts are also in the description. And finally, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And turn that bell on to be notified for upcoming surprises. And remember, your fear feeds me.